All right. Welcome back to the Board Drill Podcast. As always, I'm Kyle, your host, and with me is my co-host, Matt. And tonight, Matt, we have no guest, right? It's first time, I think, the entire podcast since December that we've had no guest. We do have a few coming up, so don't worry. But tonight, me and Matt are just going to talk. So you get the, I would call it the privilege, but what's the opposite of that?
The pain.
You get the pain of listening to me and Matt just talking. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about just 11 personnel in general. Matt's going to talk a little bit about 11 personnel from the offensive side, and I'm going to talk about trying to combat that from the defensive side. So Matt, I know we briefly talked about it, and if you're listening, I kind of sprang this on Matt. He was not available most of the day, and I was like, hey, we're going to talk about 11 personnel about 10 minutes before we started. So Matt said he jotted down some notes. So Matt, I'm going to let you start. Do you want to start with run game or pass pro with 11 personnel?
I mean, you're going to use 11 personnel if you have the right guys, right? And everybody uses it a little bit differently. Two main ways to use it. You have a tight end on the line or tight end off the line. And that's what a lot of teams see it as. I always saw true 11 personnel. When I taught true 11 personnel, was a tight end on the ball. He's in line. So that's what I'm going to kind of put the context to. I'm going to keep it defined just to that we're using an actual tight end on the line of scrimmage, not off, because to me that could be a fullback. That then you're making it wishy-washy. So for listening clarity, I'm going to keep it today just to the tight end on the ball.
I'll be happy to muddy it. Don't worry. Go ahead with tight end on the ball. So where we start with you, I assume we're going to start with the run game here, right? That's Matt Dixon special.
Wherever you want to start.
Inline tight end running the football, Matt. Like, what is the go-to right there when you think of having your tight end? Let's say you have a pretty darn good tight end. Let's call him an FCS guy, right? We're going to give you a good tight end tonight. What's your first go-to?
I never had that, so that would be a luxury that I never got to experience. But assuming and it depends on what he can do. Is he a pass catcher? Is he a blocker? Is he kind of between? Obviously, if he's a D1 guy, we're dealing with someone who can do both. We using 11 personnel. If we consider, let's say most teams now would be spread, so you'd have 3 receivers wide. We would always use that to run our version of stretch or wide zone to the tight end side. That would always be a big play for us in our offense. We would always run inside zone with that. But you're kind of limited only if you're in that set to where you're only having 3 receivers, 1 tight end. But for now, we'll keep it that way. So I'd say stretch was our main focus go-to, using that tight end and making him have an impact. Inside zone, he's not going to have as much of an impact unless you're trying to do something with him on the back side of it and you're free releasing him. But just true run game, that was always big for us. Back in our wing T days, our down play was huge with the tight end, having him be able to down block and pulling the guard, kicking in man on line. And even when we were running some 2-back spread stuff, we would get with that tight end and if we had a dude who could block, let's try to run down off his butt.
Yeah, speaking of the down play, we posted something similar to that the other day. Remember the NIU play that we posted on Twitter? That was basically down or G or however you guys want to call it on offense. I have no idea. But it was NIU really getting a set and then motioning a guy out of the backfield and then just running down to the tight end. They presented it in a really flashy way and they kind of shifted motion, all that. But at the end of the day, that was a 60-year-old play that they ran on 3rd and 2. Yeah. So I know you got a kick out of it, and that's why we posted it. I was like, Matt, this has got to be one of your plays, right? And you were all excited. You were like, hell yeah, here we go. So.
And the tight end position's tough because you got to think from an offensive perspective, if you're going to run stretch to the tight end, let's just focus on stretch right now. Let's say we're going to run stretch to the tight end. Well, you're expecting your tight end to block like an offensive lineman. Well, he's not always over with the offensive lineman. Half the time you're going to be sending him with receivers. He's not getting that extra blocking, that extra work with the offensive line. So you're working with the guy in a reduced rate, but you're putting him at the point of attack. So that's where it becomes really tough for offenses that you got to have a guy that can actually run it and run it well if you're going to run stretch to the tight end and involve him in a run scheme like that.
Yeah. And, I mean, and then how's the defense going to play it, right? Because he's got to get used to doing several different blocks. When I was always in an even front, we, base downs, we played a 6 to a tight end head up, right? But there's, the odd front teams, you're going to get a 9. There's all these different leverages that people can play against your tight end. So he's not only got to learn how to do that, he's got to learn to do that to 4 or 5 different things, and I don't know everything with it. Is he on stretch? Is he going to the 9? Is he climbing? Is he doing whatever? You guys do different rules all the time. I've heard people do a billion different things. So,
and that's a big key for a tight end. He's got to be able to make the same calls and communicate with the offensive line like he's there every single rep with them. But of course, he's not getting all those reps in, right? So that's where it becomes difficult for offensive line coaches, tight end, and how are you structured as a high school program? Not every high school program is going to have a tight end coach. You're going to be splitting those guys between O-line and receivers. And with the breakout of the spread, especially here in Florida, a lot of those guys that they don't get practice with the O-line. They're kind of thrown in roles and let's go. And, I think that's where it helps teams that have that tight end practice heavily with the offensive line.
Yeah, no, I mean, fun fact, after listening to this conversation, my first job was tight ends coach at Florida High. So it's back when we ran the veer though. So I wasn't doing whole much other than teaching veer block. And then we ran tight end reverse out of the old split back veer, which was a Mike Hickman staple. Which quick shout out to Mike Hickman. He just got nominated into the National High School Hall of Fame the other day. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool to see that for the old man, as we call him, Mike Hickman. So it was a cool thing to see. But Matt, we talk about, running stretch, running some gap schemes and all that. How about RPOs to the tight end? Obviously that's become a lot more prevalent nowadays. And if you got a good one, right, and we see him with guys like Lincoln Riley, right? He was so good at running GT counter away and then releasing the tight end vertical and all this other stuff. What did you do as far as RPOs to the tight end, inline tight end, or did you do it at all? Thinking back on it.
Yeah. We ran some stick on the backside of zone with the tight end. Absolutely love that. Very tough for a defense, not only to be set up to our strength, and now we're running it weak side inside zone, but now we're outside releasing the tight end on a stick route. Really makes it a tough read for the defensive end and the outside linebacker. We were also releasing the tight end flat off inside zone. Basically everything we were doing off RPO was our inside zone or our base run play. We didn't get into a lot of doing the stuff with the GT as far as the GT releasing them down the seam. Man, that would have been cool, but just never got to that point.
Yeah, that's one of those where I don't care who you are, and I know it's not a simple play, but as a defensive guy, the GT with being able to read it with the quarterback and then running the tight end up the seam is nightmare fuel. It makes you, if you have to worry about that, you can only run a handful of things on defense because, again, you got to account for the GT, which is a hell of a play to account for to begin with. I mean, we've seen how many defenses can't handle GT regular. Then a quarterback reading it, then releasing an RPO vertical, and you're just like, look, what do I do here? There's been clips people have sent me with that, Lincoln Riley stuff, and I'm like, I don't know. They're like, what do you call here? I'm like, I don't know.
I really think some of that gets muddied up as far as a difference between an RPO and a true play action.
Trail.
I think that's a lot of times when we have to try to call something like that, or we try to call a tight end pop pass, we were calling a straight play action with it, and making giving that illusion to the defense. And we knew what we were doing. We knew where we were going with the football at that point because we knew how the defense was fitting. Because that's tough to call as an RPO, and you're putting a lot of pressure on that quarterback, especially at the high school level, to make those decisions. Yeah, Riley, he can do it. That's what his guys do. But let's be honest, a high school quarterback, has trouble picking out which shoes he's going to wear to school if he's going to wear any at all. So asking him to RPO it, that's tough.
It's pretty wild with the. Going through some of the college film I've been through this year of, not to get off on tangent too much here, but quarterbacks and just not reading the RPO correctly. I was watching a particular game the other day with a guy who may or may not have won the Heisman. And there's a couple times in a game where they're just running, again, GT, and he just doesn't hand the ball off, Matt. And he pulls it and he does a couple other things. And I'm like, boy, if you hand GT there, Like the defense didn't have enough guys, and it's blocked up, and there's this alley, and the running back's running through it with no ball, because that's his job. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, Matt's head would be exploding right now. Like
I
GT
can
is
tell
perfectly,
you,
it's perfectly
I,
blocked up as I've ever seen it.
I watched a lot of film on that young man, and there was a lot of things that I saw that drove me nuts. Is he athletic? He's awesomely athletic.
Oh yeah, because then 3 plays later, he he scrambles around and throws a dime for 25 yards. And you're like, all right, I can see the upside here,
And but a lot of those times, how many times is the ball not getting out on time? Where you're as a coach, you're going, man, if you let the ball at the right time. But that's where that athleticism overpowers actual schematics, and all heck breaks loose, and he makes a play, right? So you get into that some, and
in the NFL they probably don't run as many RPOs, but or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. So getting back to it, you talked about the tight end air, running zone away and then tight end on the arrow route, which is just right, old school triple. It's just a different way to run it, which is such a good look to that. Anything, besides, you've kind of talked about the pop passes and things like that, anything else vertical with the tight end that you guys have run in the past?
No, but away from the tight end, we found that teams that would give us an over front to the tight end really try to set a strength to the tight end. We love to run dart away from the tight end, right? So we'd line up the tight end on one side, and then what that tight end allows us to take care of the defensive end, and block it up properly, so we don't have to read it, and we can just hand off the dart play. So we're just pulling tackle, wrapping tackle to the backside linebacker, or the weak side linebacker, and not to the backside, to the weak side, and running our dart concept, which is basically just an ISO scheme out of the gun, So we got a lot of mileage out of that.
So what if you got a 5 there? You ever get a 5
to the tight end side?
Yeah. I'm just saying. No. So some of the tight front teams,
when you line up, when you face an even front, well, yeah, you get a tight. But
yeah, I'm talking about odd front team. Sorry, even front team, you're not.
We didn't run it as much against an even front because of you don't know if you're going to get that walk down to the backside or that extra alley defender.
Even against the odd front.
So against the odd front, right? So we didn't run it as much against the odd front, but against the even front, if they're going to show us 3 technique to the strength, we can kind of predict exactly where those guys are going to be. We wouldn't want to run it to a tight front or an odd front that way as much. A tight front or an odd front, I was always with the theory of we can beat them to the point of attack. Let's go tight end wing, and let's run it at them downhill and attack their edge. Because I always felt that anytime you'd get that, we'd always see a linebacker or a smaller player now trying to set the edge. So if I'm comfortable with a tight end or a tight end wing against an odd front, I'm going to try to attack that edge and try to get leverage on them.
Yeah, and that's kind of like if you go through and you listen to, right, like for a while I got on the Aranda kick, and there's probably some 3-4 guys out there, they're going to be like, no, this is wrong. All right, so if I'm wrong, let me know. But he had a couple different checks to the tight end, right? Because that's all I ever cared about, right? Anytime I look at odd front things, I'm like, first thing I want to know is like, how do I stop 11 personnel? Because it's my thing, right? And, like one of his easy fixes was what they called Cinco, and they just moved the 4-eye to a 5 just for the tight end. And I believe it's on one of his tapes. I'm not perfect on this, but the reason being is he wants to make that tight end down block, right there at the point of attack. Because that's going to, if he's not allowed to free release to second level, that it can help out. And so it makes sense, right? Aranda's talking about it. The guy knows what he's talking about. But that was one thing I immediately thought about when you said dart. I'm like, okay, what if they're in tight front? But you did preface that whole conversation with even front. So I'm full of shit.
In even front, because it makes it very simple.
Yeah.
And that's why we would run it away from the tight end, just because we would see the 2-eye or the 1 technique on the backside. And then I could almost take my offensive tackle, pass set with him, and watch that 5 technique upfield. And it created a nice seam for us. So that's something, anytime we saw the over front, that would kind of popped up in our head. Hey, let's just run tight end, and let's, we can give them eye candy with motions and stuff like that. But to get the other guys and the, linebackers or safeties, however they're fitting, to manipulate them. But let's try to really work that backside and give an ISO look. As you typically would in an old school offense. It's all the same stuff. Weak side ISO was popular against the overfront for years, because you have a big gap there. That B gap's wide open, so you try to make it bigger and attack it. So
You think it's
new.
wide open.
Nothing new.
You think it's wide open, but we're really closing it. Yeah. All right, so this is a conversation we talked about. So I remember an example. There was a game where I got beat up because I didn't have any pressures to the tight end. And look, that's on me. There's probably guys out there listening to this like, how do you not have pressures to the tight end? We didn't really have a lot of, I mean, we could bring our 6-man pressure and that would pressure the tight end, but we didn't have a lot of good ones that just attacked, right, the tight end, the formation. You know, like everyone talks about blitzing the formation. We're very good at blitzing the open side. You know, we played a lot of spread teams like, oh, you got 2 removed? Yeah, we have something for that. You got 1 removed? We can figure that out. But blitzing the tight end was a struggle for us. And then we had a chat, and I went out and I did a lot of research on this. But before I get into that, we had a chat, and you kind of had a theory that you talked about. And then I talked to a few more guys, and they're like, yeah, that's pretty much it. So talk a little bit about the tight end and what's your, you know, how you did your half slide with the tight end because of your theory, which I think worked out more times than it didn't.
All right, so the transition to pass pro. So exactly what you just said was something that we found. Like, not a lot of teams blitz to the tight end side, right? So with that theory, you'd watch film and go, okay, are there any blitzes to the tight end side, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, you know, if you could get a film of someone using a tight end, the answer is no, or it's not very often, or it's a gap. A lot of times there's just a gap pressure, right? We could also look at, you know, field boundary. We found most teams want to blitz away from the tight end or not directly at the tight end.
Yeah.
And they also wanted to blitz from the boundary, okay, especially odd front teams. So we started going, all right, this is going to be pretty simple. We're going to do all our pass protections. We're going to practice setting either into the boundary or setting away from the tight end or to the tight end side.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm sorry, away from the tight end.
Yeah, away from the tight end. Yeah.
Away from the tight end, right? Into the boundary or away from the tight end. Now, all of my protections were half slide, so we'd get some full slide stuff in. So what we theorized was, hey, and what we did with our tight end was if we slid away from the tight end, our tight end is on free release, and that was our rule in our offense. So I didn't have to ever tell the tight end whether he's hot or not, or he's on the route or not, or different routes he knows that he's going to actually run. No, it was very simple. If we did a half slide away from the tight end, he's free released because the backside guard tackle, they're in a man concept. We never wanted our tight end in that man concept, right? You're not going to have a tight end that's as good as your right tackle at blocking an edge rusher. So we were going to free release him, okay, and force the defense to cover. But if we ever slid to the tight end side, okay, let's say we knew a team didn't have a preference tight end, but they wanted to blitz from the boundary and we wanted an extra blocker, we could put the tight end into the boundary, slide to the tight end side, call our slide or half slide to the tight end, and now when it's to his side, he stayed in on protection, right? So now when he's on the slide side, he never has to do true man. He's just the end guy on the slide, right?
Yeah.
Which really isn't too bad, especially if you're into the boundary, you're looking for edge blitz or someone coming up over the top. So that always worked out for us. Very simple rules. You know, slide to the tight end, he stays in blocks. Slide away, he's free release on a route. And that really gave us a schematic advantage because we always knew based on our calling system of whether our tight end was in the route. It allowed us to be a little bit multiple with that. It also allowed us to, using that tight end, to engage him in that slide to the boundary if we wanted to, run a 3-man concept to the field, or bounce the running back out there and have a 4-man concept to the field. And now we're putting heavy stress on half the field or 2/3 of the field, right? The open side. So it allowed us to do a few different things there that we kind of built into that offense. And it took us a while to get to that point where we were making it such a simple call and easy for the tight end to understand. And everyone else, once they finally understood, okay, the slide's opposite the tight, he's free. It was easy for the quarterback, tight end, and everybody else to understand.
Yeah, and on the flip side, that was big part of my study one off season. We got beat up in a game because I didn't have a great thing to the tight end, and when we ran our 6-man pressures, our players didn't always understand that there was an extra gap over there and at times screwed it up. Even though we're supposed to look when we call a 6-man pressure and tight end stays in and blocks, should be a 7th guy adding, right? We should always bring more than they have, but our players struggle with it. And then a couple times we called 6-man and they just ran zone into it. And we just got caught in the wrong gap. We had enough players. It should have been a tackle for loss. And it was something about that tight end that our players it was a little different, right? They're so used to the 10 personnel or so used to trips and this and that. And they got caught a little bit in that. So that was a struggle. So I spent, an entire offseason, and I went around, I talked to you and I talked to Avery and I talked to all these different offensive guys about this. And then I went and met with, it was like COVID hit, right? And I went and met with all these different DCs and college guys. And I talked to a bunch of them. Some of them didn't have great answers to it. They're like, well, we do this, we do field and boundary. I'm like, I don't give a shit about field and boundary. I want to know how to blitz the tight end. I don't care where he is. I want to call a blitz. I want us to identify where the tight end is, and I want to blitz that side, right? I don't want to call it left, right, field, boundary, any of that. So, of course, where'd I end up? Like Alabama, right? Just it seems like no matter where I start, I always end up right back in the same spot. Like, all right, what's Saban doing? And so I got Charles Kelly on a Zoom, and it was great. It was COVID. COVID wasn't great, but the fact that, you remember COVID, right? All those coaches were just like, you could get like one-on-one sessions with the DC wherever, or the defensive backs coach here. And you're like, hey, you could literally email them back, Coach, do you want to Zoom? And they're like, yeah, you ready now? And you're like, holy crap, here we go. Sorry, I'm just coming off sickness. So I'm coughing a little bit. And so I get this meeting with them. I'm like, look, I go into the meeting. I'm like, I want to know 2 things. And, they appreciate this. I was like, I want to know all your pressures to a tight end. And I want to know how you flip a pressure when there's a check with me. Because that's the other thing we struggle with, right? Teams would do the check with me, said hut, we would show our pressure. And then at that point, we could either leave it on or just call it off. There was nothing else we could really do. And so these were things that we struggle with. But we got down to a couple different pressures, right? And they ended up all being fire zones, right? So they were still pretty safe. But they attacked the tight end in a way that he's never been attacked before. And one of them was called Texas, and I have it drawn up. There's an article releasing. It'll be tomorrow if you're listening to this on Thursday. And like I should have run Texas more. I went back like a year later and looked at it, and like we hit it like a 90% rate at Texas, like tackles for loss. So I was like, why didn't we run this more? And so it was just the ability, like you said, once we figured out how to pressure the tight end, like offenses weren't ready for it. They're like, what are you doing bringing 4 guys that direction? Or what are you doing, long sticking this guy, which is something that I don't even love to do in high school, right? There's probably people listening like, my guy can't long stick. Yes, he can. You just tell him to keep going. He'll get there eventually. Just be like, look, you're just going to keep going. Just keep meandering around. And we've long sticked a nose all the way across the end, and the damn quarterback ran into him one time. We had a 330-pound nose. It's hysterical. He's like, Coach, did you see that long stick? I'm like, shut up. You just meandered over there and you got a sack because he ran into you. But oops, sorry. Trying to mute my mic for that cough. I think I screwed it up. So, but like you're saying, once we created these pressures to the tight end, it allowed us to blitz the formation. So once we personneled someone, we knew they had a consistent tight end. We could run an interior pressure against them, like you talked about, the A-gap pressures. But this one was a little different where we had guys sticking across then coming across. So we were creating stress on the interior 5 guys and not the tight end. Then we had edge ones that created stress on the tight end. And then we just had the plain like old school, like, right, like bring the nickel or bring the free safety outside the tight end.
Yep.
And that was great because most tight ends, like you said, are not FCS or D1 guys, right? So like my will linebacker can cover that guy, or at least he's in the realm of covering that guy, right? So it was like not a big deal. It's like, oh, I can just bring the safety and I can cover him with the will, or even worse on crazier situations, I can cover him with the D end, right? Like my D end's athletic enough to run with that guy most of the time. Right. At college level, it's a different thing. You see guys dropping DNs and damn guys, like the running backs, like taking off on a rail route and the DNs trying to cover them. And you're just like, what are we doing? But that became huge for us once we realized how to do that. We always felt good about run stopping to the tight ends, but then it was like, look, they know, like you said, most teams are just going to slide away. And so it was like, look, we're not getting pressure just because they have a tight end. So it caused us not to blitz. And now we're not dictating anything to the offense. And that's miserable, right? Like, you guys want to dictate to us and we want to dictate to you.
And I think you nailed it on the head. Like, not a lot of defensive coaches, I think maybe a lot of them are afraid to blitz to the tight end side because of the unknown, right? So if you got tight trips, a tight, situation, you got tight end, 2 receivers outside of them. You don't want to send that pressure and lose defenders in the pass game from that area. You want to bring them from the opposite side where there's one receiver and bring that pressure. That's easier, right?
Yeah.
But that, me knowing that as an OC and doing that study, we found that that's where the pressure was always coming from. So let's half slide that way, even though, our receiving situation's on the right side, we're going to half slide away from it and release the tight end and let him be a free release guy and put the pressure on the defense. Exactly what you were saying. Now we're able to dictate to the defense what we're going to do and how you're going to have to defend us. So I think it's important for coaches, especially defensive coordinators, to understand how to blitz the tight end and how to pick up those coverages.
Yeah, and there's two things with that. Let's talk about the tray set, however you want to call it, the tight end and two wide receivers, let's just call it to the field now, right? So the biggest place to defense in an old school over front, that's, I was an even over front guy, sorry, odd guys. Right, the weak side B gap is the easy, cheap place to come, right? The will through the weak side B gap was always a good pressure. When you're sliding the other direction, right, because that's to the man side, we feel really good. You get the will one. But now that you're sliding into it, it becomes a different way of how we attack it. So one of the best ways, the Texas one that I was talking about, our nickel's still out there on 2, our corner's on 1. We're running fire zone man, however you want to call it, 3 deep, 3 under. We run it a lot like Rip Liz, though. And we would bring the strong safety and the backer to that side. And then we would shift that other backer over to be the third, the hook 3 guy. So, right, your nickel's your wall flat guy. That other backside backer's your hook curl guy or your hook 3 guy, sorry. And then your backside DN becomes your wall flat defender to the boundary. But it's okay. He's just getting underneath 1 or taking a running back, right? And I get it, right? Every offensive guy's like, we're just running running back wheel into the boundary. Like, we tell that kid that's the only thing he should really give a shit about, right? We're like, do not get beat on the wheel. So if the running back's to your side, like your exit angle is like getting ready for a wheel. Which to some guys are probably like, we're just going to run the angle route or what? Yeah, I got you. You got to speed on something. But we would do, that was a really good one for us because now it's like, look, we have a lot of guys coming in the quarterback's face to the direction, like you said, that he wants to throw. We have still a hook 3 player for the tight end. And now look, if the tight end runs a flat route, you're going to throw it. We're just going to have to run it down, tackle it. But you know what I'm saying? If you run the tight end, if you release him vertical, plus we have a post player with the backside safety. So we feel pretty good about covering that tray set with this pressure and getting in the quarterback's face right now, right? You don't have enough guys. So the key is, I know we're bringing 5 for 5, but we're overloading one side there. So we feel really, really good about it. And it turned out it was a really good pressure for us.
Let's do this, Coach. Let's take a couple offensive concepts, 2 offensive concepts, and let's see how that would apply. Ready? So first offensive concept that a lot of people run is just your strong side flood, where your number 1 has the go, 2 has a 10-yard out, 3 has a flat route. So your number 3 would be your tight end.
Yeah, so every way that we would always cover this, and pretty much every coverage we run, we never chase the flat route. So again, our 2 would sink, right? He's our nickel's kind of Rip Liz rules, so he's got up, out, and over of number 2. So number 2 is going to run that 10-yard out, and that's where he's going to be. We're going to have a guy that's chasing 3 in the flat, right? So for this one, if you get the ball off with 2 blitzers in your face off the edge, you're going to have to throw it to the flat right now. We got one guy chasing them, hopefully like a banshee. And then our nickel should be coming out of the sky to be the vice tackle there. In a perfect world. I get it, right? Like, there's 100 things to go on, but flood is probably the best route to throw against that pressure, to be honest with you. Because you get someone in the flat right now, or if you threw bubble right now, but on bubble, again, our guys are smart enough to redirect, hopefully, and run after the football and not still run after the quarterback, but they're high school kids.
I'll coach a little secret. Not a lot of coaches, especially high school coaches, throw bubble to the tight end side.
It's true. It's true.
Number 2.
My bad. Sorry, I was thinking trips. Yep.
No, just like not a lot of coaches throw that.
Yeah. You should probably throw. No, I'm just kidding. No, they probably throw a tight end screen coming back or the number 2 on the now screen underneath or whatever it is. Didn't you do something like that?
What's that?
Didn't you will you get in tray and then throw like the now screen to 2 back underneath and release the tight end and those guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a pitch.
Our misplay. What was my next question? Oh, stick route.
I don't know. Stick.
Route. Oh no.
So stick.
Go back to flood. Go back to flood.
Yeah.
Who you said you had a guy chasing?
Yeah, he's going to be that backside backer that's starting to work over. So as they start to move, so think of it, right? Our backers normally start in 30s, but they're going to start to move slightly as that pressure comes. So that backside backer hopefully is He's almost from like his old 30 to like a new 30 front side by the time we're, the ball snapped. But he's still going to be chasing the tight end. So, like I said, if you get the ball out there in the flat, that's probably your best scenario.
Yeah.
What we're counting on is that we've brought 2 off that edge. So if you release your tight end, now we have 2 off the edge that we're getting big, we're getting hands up, and we're making that throw really hard. Where even if you throw it, you got to get it up and over guys. So hopefully it takes a minute for that ball to get there and our guy can chase you down, right? Not, not everybody's, our old, Morgan Mitchell's 6'6" and can just fire it in there. So, that's the idea behind it. Nothing's perfect, but that would be probably how we played that. So again, flood is probably the biggest weakness for that now that I think about it, but I'm sure you'll find something here in a second.
No, that was the key one that I thought would have been good. I guess stick is really similar. Not going to see much variation there from stick.
Probably not that good against it.
Yeah.
Stick your tight end's running right to the hook 3 guy. So
let's talk about something that was one of our most popular episodes in our deep choice. If you had the time to get off a deep choice and you run the tight end on the over route, and then
you have a post safety
slot.
Yeah. So, it's probably like any way that you would run deep choice. You're going to pick who you think the weakest guy is, the corner, the nickel, or the post safety, right? And probably run choice against that guy. I assume it's the nickel because in this, he's semi-outside leverage. Mm-hmm. So I assume you're going to run choice to 2, get 3 on the over, and have 2 bang the post. And that's probably where you're at. But, we're back to, again, vertical choice is great. And I've seen it a whole lot in my career from Avery and those guys. Your nickel better be your best player.
Also, vertical choice is tough with pressure. Pressure. So if you're talking about bringing pressure from the tight end side, that makes vertical choice very difficult.
Yeah, and so we go back to all that. Sorry, just to go back to it. If you're listening and you give a crap at this point, I'm a traditional even front guy. We do run some odd concepts and things like that. But if you're just in our even nickel, which is what we're talking about out of this, look, your nickel and your free safety better be 2 of your better players because those are your overhangs, right? So my nickel is the guy in 2, and now in this case, my free safety is the guy in the post. So I hope between those 2 guys, we can do a pretty good job with pressure of nailing down vertical choice. But it's football, right? So if you get us bang it on the nickel, then it is what it is. We live, we'll see you next drive, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say we've never been beat on vertical choice because I've spent an entire practice getting beat by it before. So Avery's listening to this. I hate you.
Never.
He had it. Look, early on when I was back and we were installing, he had an entire practice where I think every throw they threw was a touchdown. That was a rough practice for me.
So when you line up against a team, coach, and they go 11 personnel, you see the tight end. Let's go back to what you said. He's a Division I guy. He's a dude. What are you most worried about?
Everything.
What's your biggest concern going into it?
His ability to block and release in a pass play, right? How people run the leak and stuff like that. The guy's so athletic that he can down block a guy, probably win that block, then take off on a route and still be out there and be in space. So, it goes back to anything, Matt, is he their only dude? Do they have other guys around him? Can we double him? I've never gone into a game where we had to double the tight end, but it's an option. But the ability to do things like that, right? Your normal, right, guy we had at Oviedo, good kid, great kid, right? He couldn't do that, right? He was not going to block down, then release and run a leak and do all that other stuff. And same thing, guys we've had at Oakleaf, we've had guys that have been pretty good and all that. They couldn't do the same thing. So I think a guy that's really versatile that can do stuff like that, can block and release, just like you said, maybe on inside zone, can take that, that almost arc release, like he's blocking inside zone and then retrace and do things like that. Mm-hmm. Or screen game to him. Right. Screen game is always terrifying for every DC. I don't care who you are. If you're saying you're not worried about screens, you're lying. Because I never know what my D line's going to do no matter how well we teach them. Right. Because they see sack and they're a 16-year-old kid. Right. It seems like it's obvious. Hey, the guard and the tackle split and you're a 5 tech and no one came near you. What do you think? Well, I thought I was getting a sack, coach. That's fair.
Always. All right.
So that's my biggest worry with that.
Let's kind of flip it. Let's talk about from a defensive perspective, one of the things that we would do in the pass game, if we wanted to add a guy to protection and we knew they would bring people from the boundaries, I said before, is we put our tight end to the boundary and put trips to the field. So now the tight end really is another acting offensive lineman, and we felt we could occupy a corner one of their best pass defenders by just making him sit out there in empty space, into the boundary. So
you're talking about Nub, right? Nub Trips.
Yeah, we're talking Nub
Okay,
Trips. Yeah. So we're Nub on one side. We got trips to the field, 3 receivers. How would you approach that as a defensive coordinator?
So we've done a couple things to it. We've done a lot of things to it. Sorry. So like base quarters, day one, no wrinkles. You're going to occupy that corner, right? You're going to have the corner and the safety over there, run some kind of bracket coverage, and then to the field we're going to have stubby or mini or whatever you call it, and that's our base alignment day one. Safety's got to kind of be that extra box player when needed, and the corner's got to be the edge fitter. Which I get what you're saying, right? Like none of those guys, like our safety being a box fitter, we were pretty good about because we did that a lot with them. But like the corner, you're like, is he going to set the edge? What's going on here? Should we just blitz them? So all that stuff. So we've done that. We've traveled the corner and just said, hey, he's athletic. Let's do the same thing, but we're going to travel the corner and just play stubby with him because sometimes our nickel was a better box guy, and we just bumped all the backers. So the nickel could still play like the apex style guy out there in between on the open side. And now we bump like our will or someone to more of that kind of edge fit look. Or we'll bump the D in outside, let him be the edge and let the will play the C gap and things like that. The B gap. So there's a bunch of different things we've done with that. And then the other thing that we haven't brought up is like, are we going to stay nickel or are we going to go base personnel? And so like, there's our ability to just run base personnel, travel the corner and play cover one, right? Corner, safety down, safety in the air, cover one, let's get gapped out. Let's go play football. So those are all the different things we've done to it. But it goes back to, like you said, when we play cover one out of base personnel, whoever that online outside linebacker and stuff like that is, he's got to be able to cover the tight end. So we're back on that thing of like, who can cover the tight end? So like we did this one year, we played Bowls. And they had a pretty decent tight end, but they had a really good running back. And we played basically base cover one against them the entire game. And had a pretty good game against their Air Force committed running back. We did well. But we got beat on the post route twice, not by the tight end. So again, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I think the idea is have some variations throughout there. You can throw out base one drive, you can throw out nickel the next drive, like try things. There's nothing worse than sitting out there in the same formation and letting you just run our ass over. Nope. And I know, like, right, our biggest worry about what we're talking about is, and Matt, I've gotten this from you, you go Nub Trips into the boundary and you run buck sweep. So to this day, I'm always like, can we stop buck sweep? It's like the first thing comes to my mind. Like, hey, how are we aligned? Can we stop buck sweep? And it's such a weird thing that comes to your mind. But like, I think as a coordinator, you learn more from failure than you do from success. Yeah. And like, I failed a lot against buck sweep with you into the boundary. So I'm always like, we're going to stop buck sweep in the boundary. People are like, they don't even run buck sweep, coach. I'm like, I don't give a shit. And so that's the same thing as stretch in the boundary and everything. But no, I think it's important in the run game to have different fits based off personnel. I love personnelling teams. I love when teams like have a clear cut 11 personnel and 12 personnel and 10 personnel. It's like, great. Now we can play the game too, right? We can sub and do all this stuff, but excuse me. Yeah, it's tough though. When you have a tight end, like you said, when you start getting in YY and all that stuff and flexing him, it becomes an issue. And you didn't talk about, but I will, but the Y flexed is a struggle because then you can run split zone, you can run split stretch, you can run zone insert, which I freaking hate. Bartram Trail. You can run all these different things.
Power.
Well, that too, yeah. I thought that was obvious, but you can run all these different things with the tight end, and then people they run the boot action with the tight end underneath and out into the flat. And we struggled with that for a long time, again, until I ended up, shocker, talking to Alabama again. And they were like, look, you play like, right, cover 7, which is the split quarters. And they're like, we have this thing called a laser check, which is, you run, let's say it's a trip set again, but the Y's flexed. It's stubby out there, but if he comes underneath, everyone reads him, the two safeties, and it just goes from stubby to cover 6, which is weak rotation cover 3, to get the extra guy down there so your backers aren't having to run fit and then chase the flat. And then when I learned that, I was like, oh shit, we've unlocked something else. Like we can combat this more. Even when they run zone insert, we get an extra guy there. Like, oh, this is perfect. And, then people did other shit and all that stuff. But it gets really hard. So I think there's all these games you can play with 11 personnel that the offense can do too, that you can do defensively, but you have to be willing to go out and learn them. Because I didn't know them all. I still don't. There's probably cool shit that people do to the 11 personnel all the time that I have no idea about. which if you do, comment in the section. I want to know. Comment down here on YouTube. So anyways, I talked a lot about that, but
yeah, we'd always try to bring out that, tight end to the boundary, trips to the field.
Yeah.
And see what a defense did. That was always in our openers. We wanted to see how a defense would respond, if they're going to try to travel the corner, or how they're just going to react to that set. Because as you said, there's a lot of things offenses can do. We could run buck sweep into the boundary. If they're going to commit too much to the trips, we can have a good run play, whether buck sweep or whatever you got. Whether it's just stretch into the boundary. Used to love that. Absolutely love running into the boundary with a tight end and trying to force defense that may come in with a 7-on-7 mindset that, hey, we got to cover these 3 receivers out here. We're going to spend an extra linebacker outside the box. We're going to move some people. So now you got 2 safeties, a linebacker, 2 corners, and you don't have much inside the box to protect against the boundary run. We'd also found that, if we could narrow a quarterback's focus instead of trying to run a full field concept, that, hey, we have these 3 receivers. We found a lot of success out of that in the pass game, that, we were more accurate. We were more focused from a quarterback perspective of, I know where the ball's going. Right.
Yeah.
And that there's not I don't have to worry about the whole other side of the field. I just got these 3 receivers just this side, and here's what I'm looking at. And it gives the quarterback such a simplified view of the field. So, it was kind of trying to find a balance out of that set of, we're going to attack you downhill in the run to the boundary, but you also, as soon as you bring that linebacker or bring that extra guy back over into the box on us, we got to have the ability to attack you out there.
Yeah. Well, and then like you said, it gives you the ability to play with the running back. Right now, you can go 4 strong, or you can go, in theory, right, you can almost get a 5 wide set cheaply into the boundary, right? You can run the tight end on a drag and wheel the running back, and you can do all those different combos backside. So it's really cheap if you have both those guys on the backside, or like you said, if you put the tight end into the field and then leak his ass back across, you can do all that stuff too.
And very dangerous if you have a running quarterback. If your quarterback's able to run and you can bounce that running back out of the backfield. I forget what most people call that motion, but we used to call it bounce. We're just taking them from the boundary. We're going to work them out to the field and see if anybody runs out there. If nobody runs, we're getting the ball out there. If the defense reacts to it and runs somebody out of the box again, we're running our run play inside, whether it's GT or dart or whatever we got called up.
Yeah. Well, that was the famous series, right? Maybe the best offensive series. I guess it wasn't one series, but best offensive thing I've ever seen developed in a game is LSU when they won the national title. Trips, right? 10 personnel trips that they would, they'd bounce the running back to the trips. So they bounce him out there, they throw him the ball, right? And it was that kid what was his name? The little kid that got drafted by the Chiefs that was pretty good in college.
Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, Edward-Helaire. And so they throw it to him, right? Good game. It was like 6-7 yard game. Then they did the same thing again. Alabama's flooding to it. They run Q draw. And then they come back and they do the same thing. They run Q draw, and he throws freaking glance off the Q draw. And I'm pretty sure that was like seal the game. It was like a 3rd and 8.
Yeah.
And I was like, you've got to be shitting me. Because now the safety is like, all right, I'm thinking, right, there's that bounce motion. I'm going to go fit on Q draw. And he fits, and Burrow throws the freaking glance behind him to Jefferson or whoever, one of those guys, where it was either him or Chase. And it was like, you got to be kidding me, man. Like, what do you do to be right here as a defense? And it goes back to what I was telling you, like, look, in a perfect world, I'd love to be in a 50 front and just run cover 1. But we don't live in that. I've never had a team where you could just run cover 1. It'd be great. That'd be a great DC there.
Also very tough when those are the names on the back of the other jerseys, Jefferson, Burrow.
Right. Well,
Blair.
Let's not act like the guys at Alabama have bad names on the back of their jerseys either. But, I'm pretty sure it wasn't Minka was probably probably not in 2019. Minka got recruited in 13 or 14. He was a freshman, so he was already gone. But I remember that we recruited Minka, so I know that. So yeah, it's just, offensive guys are super innovative. And I think defensively, you've got to have something ready for 11 personnel. Tight ends are as athletic as they've ever been. Right. And they're used in as many ways as they've ever been. So if you don't have a game plan ready for those teams, or at least have it in camp where you can pull it out, like, you're going to have problems. And I'm not saying this because I'm a know-it-all. I'm saying this because I've gotten freaking beat by it. I've gone into a game and I was like, I've looked at like my head coach and been like, look, we don't have an answer to blitz the tight end, and we need to right now. And like, yeah, you can draw something up on the spot and do whatever, but as well as I know that shit doesn't work most of the time.
No.
I'm sure somebody's going to be down somebody's going to be down in the comments like, oh, in 92 we did this, we won a state title because of it. That's great. At Oakleaf, our kids were not great with change. So if we were to install something on game night, their heads would have exploded. And by the way,
high school kids aren't.
I know.
A lot of high school kids aren't.
I'm talking about this. This was a year where I blame myself for this, for not having this pressure. 2019, we gave up 17 points a game, which isn't the most elite thing ever, but it's pretty damn good, especially when we had offense that ran vertical choice of Avery and scored 30-something a game. And that game, like, look, I just didn't have an answer. So I had this really good defense and all this other stuff. And like, look, I got out schemed. So I spent the entire offseason, right? Like the Jordan meme, I took that shit personally. And I spent all offseason trying to find answers to it. And I found them. And the next year we were a lot better at it. So, I mean, it's the pursuit of all this stuff. I think that's the fun part of coaching, right? I think I don't ever want to say like losing, getting beat is fun, but sometimes you got to tip your hat to the guy, and then come back with something better later, right? And I think that's the fun part of coaching.
And that's what makes us better. That's what makes us better coaches. That's, getting beat on something like that. I know that I remember when you went on this quest to find these tight end blitzes, when we started talking about it, it's like, but as an offensive coach, you tap these defenses down if you find out when they're blitzing, what their preference is. And just across the board, I can tell coaches across the board, we found that guys just don't blitz to the tight end. That BC gap, they don't send pressure to it. Maybe off the edge, but they're just not attacking directly at the tight end because I think they're a little gun shy to get beat by the tight end on a route.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, right, the extra gap is just slightly more intimidating, right? Like, what if you're running this scheme or that scheme, or you're running buck sweep into the boundary and all that. So I get it. No, but I think look, we know that 11 personnel has come back with a vengeance, right? Everybody for the longest time, a couple of years back, they were all 10 personnel and they were slinging it around. Now they're slinging it around out of 11 in doing those things. So you just got to have an answer for it. So cool, Matt. Well, I appreciate you just talking 11 personnel with me. If you're listening, you got any questions about 11 personnel, we can probably answer it for you. Also, like I said, be on the lookout for the article. I wrote it. It's probably coming out tomorrow. If you're listening to this the day that this podcast released, just wrote a little bit on 3 different pressures that we use to kind of combat that. And then we kind of talked about, in one section of the article, I talked about kind of the check with me. If we got caught blitzing to the tight end, we just quickly check to the open side or vice versa. So we actually started pairing pressures with each other, where if we got caught in a check with me, the players knew just flip it to the other side. Which again was a big empowering thing because our kids knew what to do. I didn't have to make a check. The kids could check right away. Everyone knew what they were doing. So it was a pretty cool thing. But wrote about that. Check it out if you like reading. Again, that's boarddrill.com. It's our Substack, if you will. We do articles there weekly. So check it out. It's starting to grow pretty quick, Matt. So I see some college guys in the ranks following it. So it's pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, that's cool to see.
They're probably snickering at it, but maybe it's good stuff. So perfect. If you're still listening, again, like always, if you could please hit the like button and subscribe. It does a lot for us. Again, we're still trying to grow our brand so we can do this full time. Matt and I's goal is to create a lot more football content, but obviously we need time to do that. So we need to grow our brand a little bit. But for Matt and me signing off, Matt, any other closing words about 11 personnel?
No, guys, use tight ends. Find a tight end, use them, whatever you got. Take an offensive lineman. You got an extra offensive lineman, pull them off the bench, put them out there, give them a fun route every once in a while, make them get in that full slide, and, find different ways to defenses aren't going to know the better, in high school. So if you show up one day with a tight end and, you got a big guy, number 82, defenses aren't going to know. They're just going to know he's a big tight end, So they're worried about a downfield route, and really you're just protecting. So fine.
And I'll tell
make some fat kid's day by putting them in an 80s jersey.
Or go find him on the basketball court where he probably actually is. So
yes, recruit your
he's
basketball
probably
players.
The guy that's playing center at your school who's only 6'4".
Coaches, that's where your tight ends are. They're on the basketball court.
Perfect. All right, for me and Matt signing off. Have a great day.